It was ahead of its time. It went before its time. Let's talk about the Sega Dreamcast. I'm your man out of Japan, Jay Contra, and if you'd like to see exclusive videos about Japanese game collecting, you can head over to my Patreon. I can finally talk about my collection of Dreamcast games, which, it's just some amazing games, some of the best games ever made. Much like Capcom vs. SNK 2, which I've not put a lot of time into, but I think has one of the best soundtracks of any fighting game ever, and it's already a genre that has some games with some of the best soundtracks ever. So that is saying a lot. The Millionaire Fighting 2001, this is also available on the PlayStation 2, but correct me if I'm wrong, the Dreamcast version might be the one to have. Just that beautiful Chun-Li artwork. Maybe it's even the Dreamcast that has the best artwork in its manuals of any game. Oh, is this the one that's got a correction in it? Yes. So this game actually apparently had a misprint in the manual, so they had to include this little insert here. Now we've also got the digital Hagaki. This is when companies were transitioning from having these sort of paper mail-in surveys that you would, send in the post. They moved over to doing stuff online. Big time, the early 2000s. The Dreamcast was really just right in the middle of this huge transition from sort of the low poly 3D graphics of the PlayStation and going into the full-blown 3D of the Xbox, PS2, and the GameCube. And thankfully, we got some ports from the PlayStation 2 from the Dreamcast over to the PlayStation 2. But there are still a fair few games that have been lost on the Dreamcast. And maybe someday, you would think 20 years later, we would get some of these games in a collection. And there have been a couple. I know Ikaruga's come out for the Switch. There's a bunch of the Street Fighter games have been put out in anniversary collections. But I think there's a fair few that we could use. Shenmue also did get ported, actually. This is the launch edition of Shenmue. I think it's missing, the outer casing. I bought it because for some reason it was cheaper than the full-on release. Shenmue is... I don't know my feelings for Shenmue, because I put a couple of hours into Shenmue, and I wish I liked it more. I love people's love for Shenmue. Shenmue Passport. Oh, interesting. Oh, apparently they got something wrong. Man, they're getting manuals wrong all over the place. Oh, and yes, we get continued from the era of the Sega Saturn, we get little news inserts of games that you can buy in the game you bought. Was that Sunrise Eiyutan? Virtual On. Is that for the Saturn, though? I thought that was for the Saturn. Maybe that's the Dreamcast version. Otoire. Oh, wow. Pro Yaku Chimu de Asobo. Biohazard 2. Berserk. Beruseruku. Yeah, this is exactly what they used to put into the Sega Saturn games to talk about all the games they were coming out. This is so many games. Oh my God. Shanghai Dynasty. Tokyo Bus Guide. What? Is that a Tokyo Bus Simulator? Oh, I have to get that. That looks so awesome. I love train simulators. I would love to have a Japanese bus simulator. That sounds eminently fascinating. What is this? Shenmue Orchestra version. Oh, an advertisement for the soundtrack for Shenmue. How many discs does Shenmue have? Is it 3? Is it a 3-disc or 4-disc set? There we go. Oh, and we get an even little. What is this? Yeah. 3 discs plus the passport. Shenmue Passport. What even is the Shenmue Passport? There is so much stuff in here. Oh my God. Why do they put so many things into just the original Shenmue game? Was this a launch Dreamcast game? I remember the big deal with Shenmue was that it originally was supposed to be like a virtual fighter RPG, if I'm remembering correctly, and it was supposed to come out for the Sega Saturn, but then it ended up, there we go. And then it ended up being ported over, or, development transitioned over to the Dreamcast. I make sure that's closed properly. I do sometimes with these massive games that have the inserts in them, I do find it a little bit hard to close them. Yes, this is the one loose game that I have, but this came along with the translucent pink Hello Kitty Dreamcast that I bought a few years ago. It also came with this game, Hello Kitty's Garden Panic. This was released within the box. Now, unfortunately, I do not have the original box, so I don't know if this has a proper case or not. But hey, at least I still got the game. I think you can use the keyboard with this as well. I can't tell from this, but I've got a Hello Kitty clear pink Dreamcast keyboard. Oh yeah, and Godzilla Generations, I bought this at a book off in Fukuoka. It was, like you can see, it was $3.50 thereabouts. I bought this because it was one of the launch window games. It might have even been a launch game for the Dreamcast, so I wanted to pick it up to see what the Dreamcast was like right at the beginning of its life cycle. There's the little official Godzilla sticker there. You know this is an official game, and it's still sealed, so I don't think I'll open it up. Wait for that day when I can actually get to it. Here is one of my favorite scrolling shooters of all time, Ikaruga. This is the OG version. Well, I guess you could say the arcade version is the OG version. I consider the Dreamcast version to be my personal OG. Oh yeah, let's see, that's the first stage boss, third stage boss. That's when you're going through the pre-third stage. It is hard. I find it incredibly difficult. I can usually make it to the 5th stage. I've never actually been able to clear Ikaruga. Just beautiful, understated disc label right there. Even got it with the Obi. I got so lucky. If you're just joining these collection videos, the Obi is a spine card that was included in most CD jewel case games. Originally, they fit over the game like this, and they would have been sealed. And it's not necessary to have this to be considered a complete game in Japan, but it can often dictate the price of a game, where something, Ikaruga is normally like a $50 game, but if it has the Obi, it might be $55 or $60, and that price scales with how expensive the game is, to where an Obi can be worth anywhere from $50 to $100 in certain cases. Ikaruga, I will say, is, I think, it's the thinking shooter player's shooter, because I find it very hard to get into that shooting sort of zen state where you're sort of just paying attention to the shots on screen. Because with Ikaruga, you're constantly switching between the white and the black ships in order to sort of absorb or deal more damage to your enemies. And I find that just very difficult, but rewarding to wrap my head around. And this, you don't see this stuff in the game. There's actually not a lot of, artwork in the game itself. So it's really cool to have this stuff in the manual. I don't even, are these the bosses? Is the Hagaki? What even is this? I do actually have, I have the white Ikaruga ship model kit that Kotobukiya put out. I bought that as I was leaving Japan, and I still haven't put it together. One of these days I will. Oop. Let's make sure we keep that. Also, I wouldn't suggest throwing out your Obi ever. You can just slide it in here, keep it between these teeth in the jewel case, and that will protect it perfectly fine. Let's just look at the outside of Shenmue II. This is a really weird case where Shenmue II shot up to $50 or $60 in value when the Shenmue 3 was announced. So people flocked to getting these original Shenmue games. And especially in Japan, it was only released on the Dreamcast. There was no cheap Xbox version released. So the Dreamcast, for a while, the only way you could play Shenmue 2 was on the Dreamcast. I know it got released on the PS4, but that was years after the announcement of Shenmue 3. So here I was lucky to find it for $10. Normally a couple years ago, it was a $30 or $40 game if you could find a cheap copy of it. Next, we've got Street Fighter Alpha 3. I know the Sega Saturn version is the one that people want. It is the arcade perfect version, allegedly, but I just wanted Street Fighter 03, so I got it for the Dreamcast because I thought that was probably the best way that I was going to be able to play it without spending $400 on a single game, which there are some CD games that I have that are a bit expensive, but none of them are nowhere near as expensive as Street Fighter Alpha 3. Didn't it come out quite late in the system's life? Let's see, 1998. So that would have been the arcade version. 99. The Dreamcast was already a year old by the time that this was ported over to it. So I guess it just makes sense that the Dreamcast version would be my personal best way of actually playing this game. Great art. Not as good as Millennium Fight, though. Pretty good art, though. Pretty good. Really, really evokes that sort of late 90s style in it. Who can you play as? Well, see, and that's really why I wanted to get Alpha 3, is because you can play as so many different characters. You can play as Rose? How many times are you even able to play as Rose? That's not something that happens very often. Gen, Golki, Blanca, Cammy, Birdie, E-Honda. E-Honda, love E-Honda. I had a friend who his main was E-Honda. He's really good as E-Honda. Really difficult to beat him just because he's got those fury fists. Very difficult. Let's put 03 away. I bought this I bought this in Hokkaido. I got that at the Mandarake in Hokkaido. Really difficult to find. See, I still got a bunch of games left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break. So I think I still got 15 more minutes to go through all of these Dreamcast games. Hope you'll join me in the next video. I've been your man out of Japan, Jay Contra. Thanks for watching, and mahalo.